Arcade Heroes.
Hey everybody, this is Adam with ArcadeHeroes.com with a news-related video. I'm also going to talk a little bit about my television Amico videos, which have caused some to get upset and whatnot. But first, going to talk the arcade news, and then we'll get into that. And I'll put in timestamps, time codes, so that you can jump to the part where you'd like. But since you're here, might as well hear about some new arcade stuff. And so first off, all the arcade stuff is going to be related to location tests, which means arcade games that are on beta test. And in the arcade biz, we call these location tests. You know, nothing fancy, but that's just what they've always been called. And so all the news today comes from reader Jay Devi, and as always, he has an eagle eye for catching this stuff. And so go through each one, show a little photo of what it is, and there's more information on some of these games on the website arcadeheroes.com. And so, first off, let's start with VR Agent. And we covered this not long ago on the blog as it was shown off at a Chinese trade show. And this is developed by a company called 3 Mind Wave. And they're based out of China. And their very first game, as far as I'm aware, was actually ATV Slam for Sega Amusements, that is. And so that game's still being sold on the market, but JDevi caught that at the Super Bowl UK, I believe it is. I think that might be in London, but I'm not 100% sure. A place where Sega often tests out new equipment. There's a VR agent there. And so that seems to indicate that Sega Amusements may be involved with distributing this game overseas, outside of Asia. And so we'll just have to wait for IAAPA to see. IAAPA, if you're not familiar with that, is the largest amusement-related trade show that happens annually, except for last year, of course. And so it is coming up in about a month from when I'm recording this, a little over a month. It always happens the week before Thanksgiving, and it always happens in Orlando these days. And so I will be there to catch brand new arcades and get you news from that. And we'll see if VR Agent is there. I am curious about this one because, to be honest, just looking at the cabinet and how it's set up, it looks like a very awkward game to play because it's VR, obviously, but attached to the front of the VR headset is a gun, and looks like a two-handled gun. So it looks like you kind of hold it like this up to your face, almost like the old Vortec V3 by Global VR in a way. And so I'm just not sure how comfortable that will be, but you know, that's one of the things that they test these things out for, is to see if people take to it or not, and if it earns well or not. And so that's the first one. The second one is from Raw Thrills, and this was seen at I think it's called the Hollywood Park in Illinois, and this is at a location where a lot of Raw Thrills equipment seems to be tested. And in this picture that he provided, it's, well, oftentimes JDevi catches these things that are in the background. They're not the focus of the photo. And so, I mean, they're still there. It's just we don't have a really good look at them. So unfortunately, this is the best that we got. But on the left-hand side there, you can see what looks like a Space Invaders Frenzy, but if you look closely, you can see that it has two games on it. It has Bust-A-Move Frenzy and Space Invaders Frenzy, so it's a dual game. And it's interesting that they're testing this concept out, as Raw Thrills developed world's largest Pac-Man for Bandai Namco Amusements. They developed the hardware and the software, I believe. And when they first showed that one off, they showed it with Pac-Man and Galaga, but Pac-Man in particular had a co-op mode, and Galaga, I think it took them time to figure out if they were going to do a co-op mode or not, and I think eventually they didn't. Like, when that game was first released, they removed Galaga from it, and then later on they offered Galaga as an update to it. And so it looks like that may be what they're attempting to do with this dual machine, is just expanding on what it can offer and offering both of their games in one package. And I would love to see more things like this come around, conversion kits and things to make more of the dedicated cabinets that are out there. Dedicated cabinets are when you get a game that's custom made for a particular game cabinet, and it's usually just that one game. And in the past, conversion kits have been used to refresh a game that's not earning as well as it used to. And so unfortunately, we haven't really seen a lot of conversion kits from the major manufacturers in recent years. Raw Thrills, I think the last time that they sold one was with Supercars, which was like 2010, 2011. And so they've mainly focused on producing dedicated machines since then. As I've talked to a number of manufacturers, and they all say the same thing, and they make more money off of dedicated cabinets, and of course they need money to keep business going. But there's so many dedicated cabinets out there now that have been sold over the past decade or so, where it seems to me that we almost have too much out there, so it doesn't hurt to have some conversion kits. In fact, there's a machine right here, let me show you. That's got the out of order sign next to Assault, and this was done by Enjoy Motion, but I've had a number of issues with it recently, and I would love if I could find something to throw in there as a conversion kit, but obviously that one I probably have to get rid of the seat on for that. And so Bust-A-Move Frenzy and Space Invaders Frenzy, which have been out on the market for a little bit. Bust-A-Move, not as long. It came out in February 2020. So a lot of you may not have come across that one because I don't think a lot of locations picked it up. So that might be a good way to give it some extra oomph, since there's a lot of places out there that do have Space Invaders Frenzy. And then this one, JW sent me this one a while back. I just hadn't gotten time to really look at it, and I'll put the link to the full video below. But this is a game that was pitched to an arcade manufacturer. I'm not sure which one. It seems that it may have been Raw Thrills, just because Raw Thrills has been working with trying to do something with the Star Trek license, and I have a video on my channel about an unreleased game called Star Trek Battlegrounds, and they obviously had the license to do something with Trek, and that game was a redemption game that used projection mapping to present the gameplay, and it was an interesting concept. And Raw Thrills has been testing projection mapping for a while. They did it with Mario Party Challenge World, but that was another game that went unreleased, and so they just don't seem to have found the concept that works with it yet. But they were probably the ones that they may still have the license, I don't know, because they haven't released anything with the Star Trek name. But this game, it was a pitch from Xion Games, Xion, and I'm not familiar with them, but they put together a 7-minute video showing this idea for a Star Trek light gun arcade game. And a lot of it fits with what you would find with modern light gun mounted gun shooters like Jurassic Park or Transformers Shadows Rising and all that, where there's no reloading, it's just keep shooting and spray and pray sort of thing. Obviously there are some things there that aren't really from Trek, such as missiles with smoke trails, but where this was a pitch, obviously a lot would change between this pitch and the final product, and so I would imagine those missiles would turn into photon torpedoes, and the machine gun-like things would be more proper phasers and whatnot. That's one of the things. I'm a big Star Trek fan. I grew up with watching Next Generation and enjoyed all the other series as well, even Enterprise. The only series that I haven't cared for is all the new stuff, which just doesn't fit with the spirit of Trek that I knew and loved, and so haven't really been into that. But yeah, this one is an interesting pitch concept, and I think it would do really well if it received the funding to be completed. Now obviously, again, where this is a pitch, in the video it shows a lot of different things from different eras of Trek, such as the original series movies blended with TNG, and I think there's some Romulan ships that are from kind of the Enterprise era as well as the TNG era, so it's like a big odd mixture there. But again, this was just a pitch concept to try and get funding, but it just came at a really bad time since in May nothing was happening. May 2020 there was nothing happening in the arcade business. Everything had been paused as manufacturers kind of sat and wanted to wait things out, and I mean, they were doing some developments, but they weren't taking on new stuff. And so hopefully this one is able to get a new pitch sometime, maybe next year, and find somebody interested in funding it and going with the Star Trek license. I mean, we've had a few Star Trek related things in the arcade business, mostly with pinball. There was the Star Trek Strategic Operations Simulator by Sega, which I loved. That was an awesome game, and I love how it was set up, but obviously it's a bit advanced for today's audience and how you play that one. And so an arcade light gun shooter would fit better. I mean, granted, Star Wars is usually fit better with big space battles and things like that, but Deep Space Nine did have starfighters and giant space battles and stuff like that. So I would think that would make the most sense to put it in the DS9 Dominion War era. Again, I am a Trek nerd, or have been, and so I could talk about Star Trek all day. Now to talk about the Intellivision Amico coverage that I did recently, and sorry I had to move the camera. I had to do some things as I had a customer come in, and I had to adjust certain stuff, so that's something I could always do, and that's one of the things that I need to, I guess, help some of the critics realize as to what I do. Now, I get it, there's a lot of people out there that are talking about video games, and setting yourself apart oftentimes leads to people trying to do things like clickbait and shilling and whatnot. And so I've been accused of being a shill for Intellivision from that Intellivision Amico coverage that I did recently, and I understand there's a lot of people that have just discovered the channel recently as we've had a lot of growth, so thank you. No matter how you found this channel, whether it's through the Minecraft Dungeons arcade footage, or the Cruise and Blast stuff, or the Intellivision stuff, or anything else, and whatever brought you here, I'm glad you're here. But to give you an idea and some background as to, I guess, to defend myself against such accusations, is that I've been doing this a long time, and I've been making plenty of videos without getting any compensation whatsoever. And I mean, anything that would come from channel growth is nice. I won't complain, I won't turn it down, because it helps make it worth spending all this time. But I have videos going back as far back as 2007. The Arcade Heroes website's been around since 2006, and what we've done since the beginning is bring news of the arcade world and attention to things in the arcade world. Sometimes it's not news, sometimes there's opinion stuff, or just looking back at history and whatnot, but still it's just all focused on arcades. And why am I guess, a shill for arcades? You could call me that, perhaps, is because, well, this is how I make a living. You know, I'm at one of my arcades right now, and this is my first original location. Well, this is the fourth spot that I've been in the same mall since 2008, but I've been doing this a long time, and I've done a lot of stuff in the arcade business. At this point, I've done everything except make arcade games, and so I've worked for a lot of different companies on the side, because running an arcade, despite what you might think, is not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's at the very bottom of the list of, well, not even on the list of get-rich-quick schemes. And so very tough to do, and something that I've had to do other things to keep my home afloat, so to speak. And so yeah, if there's shilling anywhere, it would be there. But if you take some time to look back on my other videos, you would see that that's just not what I do. I don't do clickbait. I am a gamer. I've been a video gamer since I was a small kid, and I've just always loved video games, always been fascinated by them, and so I like sharing things like this from my perspective as much as I can. And when it comes to nostalgia, I have zero nostalgic attachment to the Intellivision brand and most of the games. The only Intellivision games I've ever owned were on the Atari 2600, which by my understanding weren't the best versions of some of those games. But given that I've never owned an Intellivision, and I don't know anybody that owned an Intellivision up until I went to a retro gaming party somewhere in the early 2000s, where it was the only time that I've ever come across one. One of the guys there had one, but nobody played it. I checked out the controllers, and that's where I realized it's like, oh gosh, this thing's terrible. It's just like the Atari 5200 controller as far as horribleness goes. But yeah, so growing up, my nostalgic attachment was more towards Atari, and you can see a little bit of Atari artwork on my walls here. I've owned many Atari arcade games over the years, from Asteroids Deluxe to Warlords, Crystal Castles, Centipede, Missile Command. Here I have an Assault, which you saw earlier in the video. I have a Primal Rage over there, which I need to fix. I've had many other Atari branded arcade machines. And for the consoles, I have everything from the Atari 2600 to the Atari Jaguar. And when I was a teenager in high school, I was like one of the only people on the planet that was shilling for the Jaguar at high school. I remember getting into an argument with somebody at lunch once, and it's so stupid that I did that. I mean, if I could turn back time, I wouldn't have been such a fanboy. But you know, when it comes to the Intellivision, I just don't have that attachment there, because again, it just never was there for me. So when the Intellivision was first announced, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, whatever. I was more interested in seeing what Atari was going to do with their VCS, and if anything, I should be a big shill for the Atari VCS. But for me, you shouldn't buy something because of the brand or the logo on it. And I've argued with multiple people on Atari Age where they seem to think that the reason all of us, any of us who are fans of Atari, should support the VCS is because it has a logo on it. And I think that's the most absurd argument that you could possibly come up with, because that's not a reason to spend hundreds of dollars. Like, the people that own the Atari name right now have nothing to do with the Atari of the 1970s and the 80s. Nothing at all. They just bought the name. And they don't even own a lot of the IP anymore. Like Battlezone, a lot of people don't realize this. Battlezone's not owned by Atari anymore. It's owned by Rebellion Software, who does the Sniper Elite games, and they did a remake of Battlezone a few years back, which was excellent. But there have been other attempts at remaking Battlezone, which weren't so great. Now, when it came to the Amico, what piqued my interest in that were the announcements of arcade remakes, and Moon Patrol was one of the first games announced for that. And given that I am an arcade guy, that's where I began to pay a little bit of attention to it. Now, have I delved into all the ins and outs and the positives and the negatives? No, I haven't. I don't have time for that. And I've had a little bit of interaction with Tommy Tallarico on Atari Age, the Atari Age forums, and sometimes it's been positive. Sometimes there's a couple of times where I think I've been a little critical, where I made a joke about it being delayed as much as the VCS has now. And there was something else that I was a little critical on, or wasn't sold on all the marketing stuff that they were saying. But still, beyond that, I have not spent much time at all looking into it. And I get it, there's some people that really seem to love Tommy Tallarico, really seem to hate him, and I just don't care about all that stuff. And so when I heard about this event, it was really just last week, kind of out of the blue, where heard it would be happening. I figured, I would like to go and see this thing for myself and use it for myself, particularly because of the controller. As I mentioned earlier, when I had used an original Intellivision controller, I thought it was garbage. And so when I saw that they were making something kind of like it, I was very, very skeptical of that. And I honestly was expecting it to suck. And so that's where I was pleasantly surprised that it was comfortable, it was easy to use, and yeah, I didn't come across any issues with it. And I've been told after I posted my videos that there was something about input lag online, but I haven't watched that because, again, I've got so many things to do. I've got 2 arcade locations that I have to handle, and doing these videos, doing the blog, doing a second job, and whatnot. I mean, yeah, I waste time like anybody else, but usually it's with something else. And so I didn't come across any input lag from when I was there. And I thought I made that clear in the video, but I guess I might not have. And so let me just reiterate for the record, I did not encounter any problems with controlling it. And even the tilt, I was surprised by how quickly that responded, because as I recall, it's been a few years since I've played anything on the Wii, but sometimes there was a lot of input lag with the gyro controls on there, and it wasn't always perfect. And from what I experienced, the only game that used the tilt that I experienced was the Evil Knievel game, and it was very fast to respond. Now, whether or not that it was lightning fast or the best in the industry, I don't know. I don't have the hardware to properly measure input lag, but I do understand a thing or two about input lag. Here at the arcade, I have a couple of games where you need to make sure to have TVs for them that have low input lag, good game modes, such as Big Buck Hunter and the XR Arcadia. And so that's something that I do know a little bit about. And again, I did not encounter it. Now, could there be something with the controllers down the road? You know, I only got to use them for an hour. I mean, maybe. I've mentioned this in my Cruise and Blast Switch review that I think Nintendo's Joy-Con controllers are garbage. And that's because I have, I think, 3 pairs of Joy-Cons and all of them barely work. If I play anything with any of them, and my kids, they complain if they have to use the Joy-Cons because it's a huge waste of money on that. And Nintendo, they just don't seem to care about fixing it, or they pretend it's not really a problem. And they obviously have the resources to do so, but they don't. And so if a company like Nintendo can screw up on something like a Joy-Con, something like this, like the Amico controller, maybe it does have a problem down the road, but not from what I experienced. And that's what I was trying to convey with that, and with all of this defense, is that no, I was not paid to say anything nice about the Amico. I didn't get any swag or anything like that. I was just giving you my honest impressions. And if you don't believe me, well, I don't know if I really can convince you, but if you take a look at some of the things that I have reviewed, whether it's arcades or recently, I did a review of Cruise and Blast on the Switch. I also did a review about a year ago on the Atari Pong Junior tablet thing. I didn't have any problem in pointing out flaws with any of those things. And really on the Cruise and Blast review, what I should be doing as a real shill is I should have said that the Switch port sucked and don't play it, just only play the arcade, because I obviously have a financial interest in that. I have the Cruise and Blast arcade machine here, but I didn't tell the viewers that. I said the Switch port was a better game. It doesn't look better. The arcade has the graphics advantage over it, and there's a couple of other things that the arcade has that the Switch port doesn't. But as a game itself, to keep you engaged and with replay value, it's a better game. And so I'm a terrible shill that I am doing the opposite of what I should do. Or on the Atari Pong Junior unit, since I should be so loyal to the Atari brand, I should have lavished praise on that thing. But it's like, for one, it's just Pong, and another, it's ridiculously overpriced. $129 for Pong, are you kidding me? And it didn't do anything else, it didn't come with Breakout or anything. I thought it was a complete waste of money. The only reason I had it is because I won it in a contest. But would I have spent the money on it? No, absolutely not. And I didn't tell anybody to spend their money on it. And the same thing with the Amico. Did I say you should buy one? Did I say you shouldn't buy one? No, I didn't. I still haven't really made that decision yet. I went into this really on the fence, but coming out of that event, I am leaning more towards yes. Now, one thing, I don't pre-order stuff. That's just not what I do. I like buying things at the store. I like buying physical things when I can. And I mean, yeah, I have some digital games, but I still prefer to get everything physical when possible. And So I'm gonna wait for it to launch. Now, they did ask me a question on the video there. It's like, would you recommend it to friends and family? And I said, sure, thinking about it real quick. But of course they didn't ask, would you recommend this over a Switch? Or would you recommend this over a PS5? That's where I probably would say, no, not at this point. You know, like right now I am contemplating getting a second Switch because there's some arguments sometimes at our house over who gets to use the Switch and whatnot. And so when it comes to money to spend on things, that's really what I've been contemplating. And I would love it if they would come out with a 4K Switch, but oh well. But, you know, the Amico still has some convincing to do, I think, but as a family game machine, yeah, it seemed just fine. I and my daughter had fun with it. We had fun with the games. I enjoyed the arcade remake that I played, and I'd like to try out the others. You know, if they're as good as Moon Patrol was, then, you know, I think that's great. And now, granted, there was a good question raised, you know, why did Moon Patrol have some placeholder text in it, even though the game should be finished by now? I mean, that's a good question, but even when I saw that, I didn't even realize it was Star Fox at first, and you know, so I should have asked about that. So my apologies on missing that kind of tough question, but you know, still, the game itself plays like Moon Patrol should play, or how I would expect a remake of Moon Patrol to play, because there are some arcade remakes out there that are garbage, like the recent Night Driver by Atari. That thing's terrible. But there are plenty of good remakes. I mentioned Battlezone, and one of my absolute favorites of all time is Tempest 2000. And Moon Patrol, I really enjoyed it. That is something that if I get an Amico at some point, I would definitely grab Moon Patrol for it. But I want to see Breakout. That looks good from the videos, but it's always better to play it. And you know, there could be Crystal Castles, and there's asteroids coming along for it, and Missile Command, so I'm interested in that stuff. I'm also interested in Cloudy Mountain and Night Strikers, I think it's called. I'm such a good shill that I can't even remember the names of the things I'm supposed to shill for. But yeah, so you know, I'm still just, I guess you could say I'm still kind of on the fence. I think it's absolutely absurd and silly that the accusations of being a shill for Intellivision are there. And when it comes to Tommy Tallarico, again, I'm really not interested in all the interpersonal drama or whatnot and things like that. It's just a waste of time to me. But what I can say from meeting him in person, he was very nice. He was very accommodating. He asked me many questions, and they seem to be genuine and honest, like searching, you know, for my input, wanting to know exactly what I thought about the different games and certain things. And we talked arcades a little bit. He really likes pinball, and you know, and he was also very nice to my daughter, and I saw him being equally nice to the other kids that are there. There were a lot of people at this event, you know, families, kids, and I didn't see him being a psycho or whatever it is that some people, I guess, say he is. And you know, that's just what I saw. And I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear, I guess, if some of you out there want to hear something different. And so that's just no point in wasting time on all that. And so yeah, I had a good experience, and so I'm not going to lie and say otherwise. But also, I'm going to be upfront with you. I didn't get any compensation with it, and yeah, there have been some good questions raised about that. And like I said, I'm continuing to wait and see. But am I leaning towards it? Sure. I mean, granted, I'm in a very small gaming minority. I am a guy who will spend hundreds of dollars or sometimes thousands of dollars on a single game. But of course, it's for a business purpose. But, you know, I could probably get every game console out there. But I tend to only buy game consoles where I'm going to have more than one game that I want to play. And that I'm going to play more than once. And so with the Nintendo Switch, that's an easy sell. And because there's games that I get to play with my family as well as games that I play by myself. Would I like to see them have some more games that are maybe a little more hardcore? Sure. I think that would be great. But obviously their target market is essentially the family market, and you got to come out with enough stuff there. But they do have a lot of games in the pipeline. When I saw before Moon Patrol, when it was being loaded up, because it was on a development Amico, saw the menu that was all these games were loaded onto the machine, and there was quite a few there, more than I was able to remember which ones were which. But I saw a few different games, like I think the Biplanes game and the Battle Tanks game were loaded on there, and I just didn't have time to see them all, and I would have liked to, but maybe another time. And so yeah, that's that. I'm an arcade guy, and that was the main reason why I covered Moon Patrol. And I'm not going to hate on something just because some anonymous guys out there want me to hate on it and whatnot. Or the opposite, I'm not going to love something just because you're supposed to, just because it has a brand name on it either. I just want to give you guys honest opinion and impressions as best I can. I mean, yeah, everybody has their biases, and like I said, I have my Atari biases a lot of the time, but as I've gotten older and wiser, I've also learned that everybody has made great games at one point or another. And so like a lot of these games that I have here, I have a lot of non-Atari games and that I have plenty of fun with and enjoy. And so yeah, just enjoy games. That's what we should be doing instead of arguing about other minutia. But anyways, so that's about the Intellivision Amico, and again, thank you for watching, if you're still watching at this point. And so I have more arcade goodness coming your way, so I'll have Total Nuclear Annihilation Pinball after this, and then we'll also have Luigi's Mansion Arcade Direct Capture at some point, since I got that working. And also sometime this month I want to post a full capture from Aliens Armageddon, the arcade machine. And so yeah, thanks for watching, and keep watching, and let me know what other things you'd like to see, and we'll catch you on the next video.